Mediterranean seaport of Bougie. Local labor, using the very latest in equipment like this trench digger, assemble and bury the prefabricated pipe at the remarkable speed of 2 miles a day. At one time, oil pipes were left above the ground, calling for a great deal of inspection and maintenance. They also provided a tempting target for marauding tribesmen. Now, covered with a protective material, they can be buried and virtually forgotten. When completed, this project will have a yearly flow of 14 million tons of oil. With Europe's supply further east under constant threat, this development will do much to ensure the flow nearer home and bring additional prosperity to France.
The newly discovered riches of the Sahara hardened France's attitude and helped prolong the war, which was to drag on for 8 years. When the war broke out, I came back to join the Army of National Liberation in this area. The leadership of the FLN devised a guerrilla strategy against the French conventional war machine. The key to success was not to outfight the French, but to out-organize them. The country was organized into 6 zones, each a complex pyramid of resistance. One of my tasks was to be the liaison officer between the executive committee of the FLN in Algiers and the commander of the Northern Constantine Zone. After 3 years, I was arrested while on a mission in Algiers and spent 4.5 years in prison. There, I continued my education. In this sense, I was lucky. My brothers were involved in the war. My father was involved in the war. My father actually was killed not far from here by the French. My brother was killed also in the village, there, after he lost his ability to hear, because he was involved in a battle somewhere where it lasted for 24 hours. And I have also another brother who was killed over there in Tasqif, and 2 other brothers. One of them was tortured to the point where he's neurotic today. He's sick, he's mentally sick in the village. And another one was involved also stayed in Algeria as a guerrilla from 1955 through 1962. He survived it, and I also survived it. So in this sense, I think this is really my father was responsible for all this, in a sense that he really taught us from an early age to think of one thing and to give thought only to one thing, that is to free Algeria.
War-ravaged Algiers was jubilant to the point of hysteria. By a 201 majority, the referendum had declared for independence, and 132 years of French rule was over. The rejoicing went on through the night. Even Oran, last big stronghold of the OAS, seemed to think the war was all over. Then some shooting broke out.
The French settlers' secret army, the OAS, opposed to Algerian independence, resorted to a scorched earth strategy, killing Algerians and even burning the university library. Provisional government of the Algerian Republic, established in Tunisia, already divided within itself, arrived in Algiers. The war had devastated the country. The struggle for independence unified all classes. The majority of the population wanted an independent, non-aligned socialist state, born of our historical experiences and culture, and responsive to the needs and aspirations of the people. When France recalled its troops, 1 million European settlers who controlled and managed the country fled. The nation was at a standstill. There was a massive flight of capital. The banks were empty. The settlers, the engineers, professional classes, the skilled workers, who had consumed over half of all products sold in Algeria, departed. The market collapsed. Into this vacuum were sucked conflicting social forces. Immediately, the top jobs, as well as the best villas and apartments, were carved up by the middle class and the FNL leadership. The farm laborers on the old colonial estates had to provide for themselves and their families. They set up self-management committees to get production going again. Industrial workers then did the same thing. In the colonial period, the only factories were small-scale ones servicing imported goods. The development of local industry was undermined. But although the subsidiaries of multinational companies were unaffected, the self-management committees in industry at least prevented the Algerian merchants taking over these factories. It presented the new leadership with a fait accompli they had to accept. This paved the way to nationalization and a non-capitalist path of development. The infrastructure Algeria inherited was geared to a colonial economy. The harbors, roads, and railways were designed to provide cheap manpower and primary commodities to the French market. And Algeria also served as a dumping ground for French industrial products. For the citizens of today's independent Algeria, the colonial legacy permeates their everyday lives. You cannot undo 130 years of French colonization in just 20 years. The question is how to start the development of a country. Industrialization is an obsolete necessity. It requires a great deal of sacrifice. It has a logic of its own. This logic is universal. Every society, regardless of its cultural background or social system, has to bend to it, whether we like it or not. This is the only way we can master science and technology. For the youth of the country, this is the hard way. It requires a great deal of effort, work, concentration, study, and political determination so that they can seize the destiny of the country and move a second step towards constructing it better and making it more effective. Cement and steel, for example, are vital for the construction of schools in a country that has millions of school children queuing up, waiting to be educated, housed, fed, and then employed.
ويقفزون حتى قال المعلم يكفي نبدأ الآن بالسبق ونلعب.
From the outset, the French had closed down Algerian schools and banned the teaching of Arabic. After independence, Arabic was reintroduced as the language of basic instruction in schools throughout the country. So far, French has been used in administration and higher education, but Arabic is now gradually replacing it.
يلبسوا حذاءه فتحة.
20 years ago, 1 child in 4 went to school. 3 out of 4 go now. That means there are 4 million young people needing more teachers and better textbooks. To run modern, sophisticated industrial plant requires higher standards of education, technical training, specialized skills, and management expertise.
يلبسوا حذاءه. من يعيد هذه الجملة؟
كان مصطفى يتسابق مع الأطفال.
The massive program of industrialization that began in the mid-1960s was aimed at the gradual nationalization of all foreign interests in the country. Now, those precious revenues from oil and gas could pay for the industry that processed these resources. This iron ore was once exported in its raw state to France or to Britain. Now it is being delivered to the steel complex of Al-Hajjar. Jamal Mustafa is the Director of Planning and Industrial Management.
We had many obstacles. Well, I think the first obstacle we met was in our mind. We thought that to develop this kind of industry was something extremely difficult. And I think that we had to overcome this kind of inhibitions to start the industry. We had to design our own way to build this kind of complex. And we had a lot of problems because we did not know how to start the construction of a plant. Each time we had to solve problems we did not thought about before. Then we had all the usual difficulties which were related to the lack of people, of skills.
We had to give contracts to foreign companies for building factories and training the Algerian workforce. These technicians are monitoring a Japanese-built plant. Mr. Hajjat is the Director of Research.
We can bring people from abroad, experts, and they will tell us what to do. Of course, we have to pay. But personally, I think that although we do it, that experts can give immediate solution. And often they will not say how to find this solution. They will say, this is the solution. You must do like this. And for people who are in the plant, it may be okay for them just to know the solution. But if the same problem will arise later on, in this plant or in another plant, we always have to call the expert to tell us how to do.
So the most important thing is to know how to resolve the problem.
Yes, it's to know, to have the whole know-how, to have the whole scientific knowledge, to know how to find the solution. I mean, so as the whole know-how stay in the country.
In 1962, Algeria had only 3 graduate engineers. Today, thousands of them are running the new factories. Knowing that the source of power comes from industry, the capitalist nations have been trying to prevent the industrialization of the Third World. The developing societies, with 3/4 of human population, produce only 9% of manufactured goods in the world. This is the source of the unequal distribution of wealth in the world, and it is inequitable, and it has to change. The thinking behind the industrialization drive was that by the time the oil runs out, Algeria will have an industrial base capable of sustaining growth and providing jobs for the majority of Algerians. I believe that this is the only way we can build a viable economy and a viable modern state capable of withstanding interference and pressure from foreign powers. If a country remains undeveloped, it will never be viable. Plans to draw up mechanical industry in a scale suitable to Algeria's needs have been resisted, not only by France, which has consistently opposed the industrialization of Algeria, but even by pro-French elements within the Algerian government. For Algeria's agriculture to recover, it needs to be mechanized. This fertilizer manufactured in Algeria from natural gas is another example of a vital product that helps agriculture and also saves on the import bill. If oil and gas revenues are not converted into stimulating food production, but into importing food, what will future generations do when the oil runs out? Algerian agriculture faces a severe crisis. If the authorities responsible were as efficient and dynamic as those of industry, Algeria would be today an exporter of foodstuffs instead of an importer. To house the poorest rural families, the state planned the construction of 1,000 socialist villages. Only about half have been completed so far. This is the 8th May 1945 village, where 50 families share a school, clinic, and mosque, and work together as a cooperative.
عندنا تراكتور قديم الدوزان مخصوص الدوزان اللي تكنيسيان موش حاضرين هنا دايما حتى نروحوا لبجايه يا سيدي ما نعرف 15 يوم ولا 20 يوم باه نرد التراكتور. يعني الحقيقه كاين فيها صعوبات صحيح. ما كفاش الخدمه، تراكتور واحد يمشي للبيع ولا يروح يخدم في المزرعه. تراكتور واحد ما كفاش. عندنا الموتور تاع الماء مفسد. عندنا واحد الموتور برك، واحد راه مريح. نحب نحوصوا مثال الحكومه ولا حاجه، الحكومه حاشاه. واش هو احنا مثال عندنا تراكتور واحد برك، واحد هذا كيتكسر نبقاو هكا امبان. منين تمشي؟ منين تجيب تراكتور؟
ما جات الحكومه تشوف. ما يخدموش الفلاحه، حنا ما نخدموش على بلاصتنا، حنا نجريو. والله غير صبر كل فلاح ما يخدمش. وانت ما تركدوا ما تكلموش على رواحكم، والله لا جني ولا يشوفها. وراه انا عماه غير 100 قنطار بطاطا راحت، غير 5 قنطار بطاطا. اسيدي مرحم ولادي عاود غير 100 بطاطا راحت كلاها الماء. واحد ما قال الفلاحه وما يخدموا من غير ما كاش يخدموا. كيضرب الواحد واقف يعيا، خليه عاد يضرب في التراب. كيفاه؟ اهدر ما لا تهدر من غير على التراكتور وهذيك هدر الشيء اللي مخصوص. البطاطا لا تخسر. اسنا البطاطا لا تخسر.
الحاجات موصله كامل.
الحكومه بس تخدم لولادها. هي ما تخيرش هذاك الفلاح، هذاك خدام، هذاك الطلاب، هذاك هي ما تخيرش عندها كيف ولادها كيف الكل. نعم. الفلاح هذا واش هو العامل تاع الدنيا. إذا أخذت المزرعة واش ناكل؟ تراب هو اللي يعيش الدنيا. تراب هو اللي يدير العامل الكل. تراب هو اللي يدير الطيارة ويدير لي شروية. ماوش الوزن اللي يدير لي أنا الطيارة، التراب اللي يدير لي. نعم. على مثل على التراب.
I believe that there will be no development without the creation of an industrial base. To nip in the bud the process of industrialization is a monumental error of judgment, whose consequences will be to condemn future generations to hardship and deprivation. Once a basic industry was set up, it became possible to concentrate effort on the more sophisticated manufacturing of consumer goods, as in this electronics factory in the town of Sidi Bel Abbas. Half of the 5,000 workers here are women. Fatima Dif is 25 and has been working here for 4 years. You can find a plant, an electronics plant, anywhere in the third world, like this one, assembling TVs and radios. But the originality of this plant is that it manufactures its own components, which means that Algeria is going to master the basic electronic technology. And this also, by manufacturing its components, is making it relatively independent from the multinationals who actually control the international electronics industry. In this sense, then, the Algerian program of industrialization is very original and very ambitious. However, it does have some problems. These problems are caused by a political environment characterized by red tape and an inefficient administration, which is responsible for frequent shortages, including vital spare parts. These third world workers have mastered the functioning of a complex technology in less than 20 years. But the success or failure of industrialization is always determined by political rather than technical factors. Traditional Arab urban society was divided into two broad domains, private and public. There was a sexual division of labor. Women were relegated to domestic tasks within the home. Work outside the home was monopolized by males, which is why social pressures are still being exerted on these women. Some of them still have to wear the veil before they leave the workshop under the strong recommendations of their husbands and brothers. They wear the veil as a sort of symbolic extension of the home, of the private domain into the public domain. Industrialization, the increasing employment of women, will eventually render it obsolete. Sidi Bel Abbas, where Fatima lives, used to be the headquarters of the French Foreign Legion. In its streets, you can see the transitional stage through which Algeria, like most Arab countries, is passing. There is a striking contrast between the traditional and the modern clothing styles, between the younger generations and the older ones. Although the Algerian population is not conservative politically, its social conservatism is without any parallel in the Mediterranean. No wonder a male Muslim fundamentalist told me that this female labor force constitutes a menace. Despite the opposition from their menfolk, these young women do not go out to work just for their own pleasure. Most come from large, poor families like Fatima's. 9 younger brothers and sisters, as well as her retired parents, are supported by her pay pocket of an equivalent of only £50 a week. The average Algerian family has 8 children, and TV in nearly every home stimulates all their desires for a better life. The work experience helps girls like Fatima to assert themselves in the factory, in the home, and ultimately helps their eventual social and legal emancipation. Their work may have a tremendous impact on society. This factory, by putting men and women to work side by side, helps construct an independent economy, and hence a free society. By working together, they are bound to raise questions pertaining to their future. Industry will provide Algerians with the means of their self-realization, will foster the emergence of new social attitudes, new sensibilities, and a new philosophical, political, and cultural outlook. Algerians must not only learn new skills, but change their social attitudes to meet the challenges of the 20th century. The weight of the past in our collective mind is like a ghost that not only haunts our present, but may prevent us from shaping our future. There are now 20 million Algerians. Our rate of growth is one of the highest in the world. 60% of the population is under 20. A generation has grown up in independent Algeria with new aspirations. Almost half the population now lives in cities, and the rapid urbanization has created many problems. The housing crisis is so severe that 80% of families have only 3 rooms. Some of the basic necessities of life are still hard to find. The utilities and services are overloaded. The transport system is so inadequate that Algiers, with a population of 3 million in 1982, had only 36 functioning buses. Education, health, employment, and leisure facilities are insufficient. What else but the development of the nation's industry can satisfy these people's needs? Mohamed Azzouz was 18 when he was hired and trained by the steel plant 12 years ago. Like most other workers here, he came from the countryside. The steel industry offering him the chance to learn a skill, earn a decent wage, and aspire to a reasonable standard of living. But Mohammed and his colleagues also suffer from numerous frustrations in the daily life of the city of Annaba beyond the steelworks perimeter. As elsewhere, the development of services has not caught up with the workers' needs. Housing, schooling, transport are all inadequate and generate tensions which they bring onto the factory. The law of socialist management ensures that workers' representatives participate in the decision-making, which the managers welcome, but this allows the officials of the party, who control the union, to interfere with the everyday running of these factories. This has compounded the problems of public industry, which is then faced with the unfair criticism that socialist management does not work.
Et qu'on va apparaître à partir des paramètres affichés ici. En termes de production, il s'agira de produire en 82 1 080 000 tonnes de fonte et 843 000 tonnes de coque.
It may seem to the romantics like a vision of hell, but this is the very essence of progress. Work in industry requires much hardship and sacrifice, but it is the source of modern civilization. Without it, there is no growth or prosperity. To run such an industry needs a high degree of coordination, organization, and scientific management. If the pace of industrialization is not slowed, all this is bound to contribute to the modernization of our economy, society, and culture.
Well, we started, and to start, I think, was the most difficult thing in a country like in our country. We have been able to start from nothing and to create an industrial basis. We made a number of mistakes, we had bad choices, but this is the learning process. It was costly. We are not highly efficient. But when we saw what happened in 20 years, and 20 years, what does it mean for a country? If we had to propose to a country, would you accept to pay this X billion of dollars and to be sure that by 20, 30, 40 years, you will be an industrial country? Well, do you know many countries who would refuse such a proposal? In fact, this is the bet we made in Algeria. And I think that this bet now is about to be won.